We have with us, in fact, it's a full house. So I must mention this, John, pardon me. When we had our last meetup, I think that was last year, some issues were raised, and we were like, okay, part of the issues that were raised was, do these companies really want to get involved in what we are doing in our tech communities or our developer communities, right? So John and I met, and we were like, okay, how can we get these companies more involved? I mean, you wouldn't know if you don't ask them first. So I was like, okay, let's reach out to them. So we reached out to all of them, 7 of them. And like my people will say, in my mind, I was like, okay, if I reach out to 7, pata pata or bad as it bad, if 3 or 4 reply, it's okay. But now you can see we have a full house. We got yes from all of them we reached out to. Please, can we give them a round of applause? So we are really very grateful. Thank you very much for joining us. So I think you've met Francis at Eden, but I'll still do a formal introduction. Francis Ada is from Andela. Works with Andela as a senior consultant. Okay. So we have Kwesi is a partner at Express Pay. Oh yeah, sorry. So yeah, we have Nana Bing, that's the name. Nana Adani. I don't know if I got the pronunciation right. I told him. Okay, Nana Adani is a full stack developer at Kudobos, a SaaS company that helps e-commerce merchants grow sales via social reviews and SEO. So welcome, Nana. We are grateful to have you here. Then we have Idem Kumozi, still a senior consultant from Andela. We're grateful to have you here. We have Lady Omega Hammond. She is the CEO and co-founder of Ampersand Technologies, a software company that helps brands build digital products. Thank you, ma'am, for coming. Then we have Kwesi, partner at Express Pay, a fintech company that handles bill payments and airtime top-up. Thank you for coming. Then we have Augustine Ajay. So Augustine Ajay is a senior software engineer at CodeLn, who likes junk food and music. Those were his words. Okay. Upsell helps businesses sell everywhere on a single platform. Welcome. So we have Nana Beni, a senior software engineer at Rankard, a social recommendation engine that connects brands to relevant mobile audiences. Thank you for coming. Yeah, so is this going to be a very interactive session, if you guys don't mind? So you have the chance to ask questions, perhaps at the end, but amongst the panelists, I'll be directing certain questions to you, but if you have a contribution to make, please feel free to add to it. So I'd say the focus of this panel discussion is to enlighten the developers, as both of them have done earlier, about job preparedness and what companies look out for when they are recruiting software developers. So I'd say my first question goes to Kwesi from Express Pay. Okay, so what we'd like to know is, like I said earlier, you guys were specially selected because we reached out to someone amongst them and were like, who are the people that the companies that these developers would like to hear from? And luckily for us, they picked all of you, and luckily for us, you guys came through. So we want to know, we need you to enlighten us more on what it's like to work with you. We want to know, first of all, the recruitment process, since this program is about jobs 101, about getting a job. So we'd like you to give us a summary of the recruitment process in, we'd like you to give us a summary of the recruitment process in your company. How often do you recruit? What are some of the qualities you look out for when you're recruiting? And also, right here we have developers at different levels. We have beginners, we have intermediates, we have senior developers. So when you recruit like that, what level do you mostly recruit? Are there chances for interns to also apply and things like that?
Okay. So generally at Express Pay, at the beginning of every year, we have a plan on what we want to achieve during the fiscal year. So that kind of leads us in the direction of what kind of skill sets we require at our company. In terms of how many times, so usually it could be between 1 to 2 times. during the year. In terms of the skill sets that we require is anywhere from senior developer to someone who just recently graduated. But it's more of once we have a conversation with you. So let me talk a bit about our interview process. I'll try to say it's like we just try and see if you are fit for us and if we're fit for you. So you come, we'll have 30 minutes, 45 minutes conversation. We do a quick test just to see your problem solving skills, as Francis highlighted. It's not really about whether you're able to solve a problem that we give you, but it's just the steps that you take to be able to get to the solution that you're able to show to us. And I said we get either entry level or senior developers.
Okay, so for the interns around, you heard him. So most times we have events like this, most of them come around and like, I have very little knowledge of, say, Python, because you mostly teach Python, right? What are the kinds of jobs I can take on now? So I think what he's trying to say still is like there's a room for you. Perhaps for interns, you place them under a senior developer so that you can learn the process, right? Okay, so I think our next question will go to Nana Beni. So still something similar. We'd like to understand, so say there's a vacancy in Rankard,
okay,
and you need a software developer. Which places do you go to first? Do you go to social media? How do you try to get this talent? And also, what's the recruitment process like? Do you test them? How do you test them? What are the kind of questions you ask during the interview? Things like that. Let's just have an idea of how to go.
okay. So you can, to find careers opening, you can go to our site, ranker.com. We also use LinkedIn for source potential candidates, and then we also tend to use references. So, for instance, if we have a developer in-house who is doing quite well, we ask him, do you have any friends who are developers, and you can recommend them to come on board. And sometimes they do, and then it pays off, because then you get them bringing another person who is equally good or at par with them, and then that also works. And then we also have internship positionings opening. So we have quite a number of developers now who have transitioned from interning with us. So usually summer break, they come intern with us, they come 1 or 2, when they graduate, they then move in, and then they eventually, those kind of routes, it's a bit more, we don't do the technical interviews as we used to, because we get to test them on the job during the internship process. So we have an idea of their skill set and their level at which they are. So with that, but if you come in and you didn't go through the internship route, you do your technical test, we have a code that a problem we give you, you apply your solutions to it or your algorithm and arrive at a solution. From that, you proceed to interview with the technical team. From the technical team, you proceed to the culture fit, management, style, and leadership, and then you end up at the VP or CTO interview. So it's about 4 interview levels.
Wow. Okay. So it means serious business. That's interesting. Okay, so I'd like to hear from you, Nana. So I think I visited your company last year, and it was like a super cool place. I saw the girls work. I could feel the kids, right? You can see that there's a lot of brain work going on. But part of the things I was wondering is, are they all working on one project? Are they working on different projects and things like that? So I think even they would like to know, what are some of the technologies you use in your in CodeLn, like tech stack, frameworks, storage technologies, deployment, and what are your code standards like?
So at CodeLn, it's not one app. Right? We're not working on one application. However, before I talk about the tech stack, earlier in my career, I learned that the language is just a tool. The framework is just a tool. I think Francis talked about it as well. The key thing is to solve the problem.
Yeah.
So on a daily basis, we solve problems, regardless of the tool. So once you solve the problem, you can pick the right tool for the job. So for one of our, we are mainly a JS house, so mainly the meat stack at MongoDB, Express, Angular, Node.js. But then for some tasks, we employ Python. Maybe for scripting, Python is very good at scripting and has libraries for that. And so you have a whole code base for that as well, since it's part of our core business as well. We also acquired a few applications or companies that came with their own applications that also work with PHP. So that should give you a good idea of our tech stack. The main thing is to be able to solve the problem, right? But then we lean a bit more towards JavaScript.
Okay, interesting. So I think the next question goes to Baby Omega. So I'll share a personal experience, right? I was talking to someone I hoped to be my client, right? He recruits software developers regularly. So I was telling him, this is what I'm doing, that I should come and patronize me, things like that. And he was like, no, I don't do African development. I was like, what? Why? They said like they have this attitude problem. They are mostly proud and they don't know Jack, right? He says, well, it depends. He mostly gets outsources from India. So he says that those people, they know how to do the job on time. They can get the job done on time, and they won't give you a sort of, pardon my language, bullshit, right? So I think apparently he has had bad experiences working with African developers. When he tells them he wants to be the project, they give them a long time frame. They give him a long time frame, and they tell him, like, there's this attitude towards, like, I really don't want to do this thing. It's like I'm doing you a favor for building you this project. So that's what he gets from them. So it's like, no, I'm not doing this again. So it's more tuned towards Indian developers. So I think what I'd like to know from you is, since I understand you deal with a lot of software developers, you work on client projects and all of that, so what are some of the soft skills that I must have for any candidate you want to employ? And where do you think the African developers are missing it in terms of soft skills, right, in relation to devs abroad? And if perhaps you had your chance, I think you do already, would you prefer to outsource the projects to people outside of Africa, or would you rather use talent here in Africa?
3 in 1. Okay, so soft skills. For me, I always say that a developer has to be teachable. Irrespective of how knowledgeable you are, you should be very open to be taught some things that you do not know. You should also not be afraid to make mistakes. You should be able to discover those mistakes and learn quickly from them. Because we don't have time to pamper you and say, oh, don't worry, you'll be fine, next time do it this way. No. Another thing too is you have to be very analytical. It's not just about writing the code, it's not just about just putting out a solution, but knowing that at any point in time, if you even had to improve upon your code, you can do so in the future, or you can do so when you have a little bit more time to do that. And then the last thing that I'll say in terms of soft skills is your attention to detail. You are literally creating a product. You're like an architect, or you are like a mason. And if your code, you don't pay attention to every single detail or every single line of code that you're writing, you're just writing it because, like he said, you went on Stack Overflow to copy it. At the end of the day, you are doing yourself a huge disadvantage. You will not learn, you will not grow, and you will not be able to do more advanced things. The second question,
I think this is around, like, would you rather outsource your projects than employ?
This one, you might put me in trouble, but see, African developers are my go-to choice. And the thing she said about us being proud, I'll say yes, some of us are proud because we are in an environment where it's like we are doing the impossible. The tech industry is small, so when you do one thing, hey, you are the exact of of it all. But I would always say I'll choose African developers over outsourcing, just because, for instance, in my case, I'm building a team. And for me, if you're working, even though I try to encourage remote working, I still like to see you in person, see how you're writing your code, see how you're even struggling to solve the problem, because your whole demeanor will tell me that you can, when you tell me 2 weeks, you'll actually get this done in 2 weeks. So it's a tricky thing, but one thing that I always do to get the real juice out of them is there's a lot of work to be done, and the work will humble you. The amount of code you have to write, or if you say you are all that, I'll give you the work. And once you are doing the work and you realize that it's not going well, you humble yourself, and you come to the level that I want you to be at. So don't be too proud. When you're too proud, there are measures to bring you down. But ideally I'll go for African developers, because I think we always try to put ourselves in the situation. We always try to want to do things better. Indians want to get quick cash in, but for us we want to be impactful. We want to be like, oh yes, I did this, and brag about it a bit. So I'll go for African developers instead of.
Okay, so I think maybe Francis, you have something to contribute towards that. Like being that you work in a team that's I think abroad, right? Yeah. So have you experienced any of such, perhaps soft skill challenges working with people, even in your past experience working?
Right. So in terms of what I currently do, so I mean there's been times that clients have had problems with me because I made commitments that I couldn't meet. Yeah. All those things happen. It's part of growing up and learning and adapting. So you go and promise, make big promises, and you're able to deliver. That happens. You learn from it. Yeah. And so I'd say that in my current experience, I think I've matured. At this stage, I've matured to the point that I know what it means to commit to something, or to say that I'll have this ready by this time. Yeah. And that is important, like, decision to make for somebody like me, because I work from home. And if I don't have that discipline, I'm just a mess. Like, I'll get fired. Like, it's that simple. You need to show the work you've done. Like, every day you go into work, people are showing the work they've done. You are in that environment. There's no way that you will say that you not do what you say you do. Yeah. So the places that you get to work, as Lady was saying, like when you're working in a place, based on the vision that and the mission of that company, you buy into that, and that begins to mold you. Like that begins to change you in a different way, because the culture in the place also like gets infused in you. If you go and everybody is doing the right thing, it will be very, very weird for you to be the only person doing the bad thing, and people will start beginning to look at you in a weird way. And so when you join a company, really, what you do is actually to study the people and see the interaction that's going on. How do they relate to each other? How do they go about doing their work and all of that? That thing, whether you like it or not, you do it. It is something that you do when you're a new person in a place. You need to study the environment, how people engage. Then you also learn like that. It's a group effect. Yeah. So in terms of freelancing and not delivering the job that you say you're doing and all that, that is true. But I wouldn't say that it applies to everybody. It just, if you're a freelancer, you care more about the next work you do. So even though you might have 10 or 2 jobs sitting on the table, but you still are interested in the job that is about to come to you. Yeah, so you go make promises, then you come. You have the load that you can't carry. Yeah, and some of us, we're not that open to that point that, okay, I have this person, I'm going to do this for this person to do and all that. So you try to do everything all by yourself. And by the time you realize you're not meeting the deadline that you set for a client and all that, it becomes a hard conversation to have and all that. So I wouldn't say my experience was very intentional. It was just some poor decisions and some poor time management and stuff like that. Yeah. So if you're here, you have to be aware of those things. Yeah. Because of the hassle that comes with freelancing, you want to you want to be sure that next month you will have some money coming in. One way to have money coming in is to have a project lined up. If you don't have a project lined up, it means you're going to so you have to be wild. So all of those things, like tie into that. You feel like those are some of the issues that come up. Like if you work with a company, there's that job security. There are things that you don't worry yourself about.
So I think what he's saying is don't buy too much and you can chew, right?
Sorry, can I add something? So what we realized that was making us very inefficient. So what we designed was an engineering flow where you get a functional spec. So for instance, if you are here and your client brings you a proposal, what you have to do is to break it down to the smallest unit and then lay it out, probably in a spreadsheet. And then with that, because every component of the project is broken down to the minimal task, you can assign timelines to it. And your timeline should always be in 30 minutes incremental. So your 30 minutes, 2:30, 1 hour, so then you can convert it so that you can tell that, okay, to you the client, I can deliver this and that module in 2-3 days or this amount of hours. So we as Africans, we have that inability to actually quantify stuff, because even in Ghana we like to talk in not exact terms. The scanning every brain, it's a lot. Do you get it? But when you break down the work that you have to do, your login, you're going to design an application, the login will take this amount, then you commit to it, then you share it with the client, so the person has a fair idea of what to expect and how long the time will take. So he or she can agree to it or not agree to it. It gives you your peace of mind, you can deliver quality product, and then you're off. So, sorry.
Thank you. Okay. So it's still about soft skills and even generally about tech skills, right? So we'd like to know, have you ever had a bad hire? Say someone you employed and could not deliver on the job, and what actions did you take? Did you fire the person? You have a nice face, those guys all your fire. Or did you say, okay, fine, I'll take it upon myself to train this person?
Okay, a lot of people going through my head. I'll just grab one. In principle, no. In practice, no. So let me just share this experience. There was one developer who at that time we needed to show that we can do an app, mobile app that can help businesses on the go, maybe to communicate with their customers. So we had lots of applications. There was this one particular guy, and I don't know, but he got to know we are the hiring managers. He kept on firing emails to us, boss, I can do this job, I can do this, I can do that. And after we don't fire, we only hire. We persuade you to resign. So, he came for the interview. He came to, we asked 1 or 2 questions, like what Francis just presented. He couldn't really convince us, but he was still sending emails, sending GitHub links. And then we started, okay, let's just bring this guy in. But because after we sort of hire you, there is this 3 months probation, and it's what people forget, it's not a full employment. You are still under scrutiny, sort of, And then we handed over the project to him. We met with him, like I say, timelines, this task, and then it was just bad. It was bad. And what we do as a group is, we try to use Scrum and all these processes. We meet every morning, discuss what's going on, what are the challenges. And it looks like this one person, so everybody started to crowd around him, even trying to code for him, just to, it's teamwork, It happens in companies as if it's your second family. You spend almost 8 hours, 9 hours there, times 365, a lot of hours. So everybody comes together. So we try to code for him, and it looks like. So he himself came to see us and was like, you know, we put him on salary and everything. We don't mind. It's a room to come and learn. We are all trying to do something to benefit someone. So I think that's the one hire that wasn't good enough, even though we tried to do our best for him. So in effect, like what Francis or Adam was saying, just know the basics, make sure you can deliver, not just you go and clone somebody's GitHub project and make it your own and even show apps and all that. It doesn't work like that. I think that's the only bad hire that we had. And it's a very sad experience, personally. It wasn't good at all.
So perhaps because we spent a lot of time trying to help.
Yes, and it was drawing everybody back. We all had our individual work to do, and now we have to come around. End of day, you see this guy just sitting there, as if, and you know, we don't boss you. Like, hey, have you done this? No. The next day you come and report, and if everyone gives a nice report, and you are still where you are, you can know that this place, Charlie, I don't fit. Let me go and strengthen up, and then I'll come back.
I think the guy has a conscience.
Yes.
Conscience and zero. Okay, maybe we'll come back later. So thank you for that. So now let's go into more about cultural experiences in your workplaces. So I think we'd like to know still what it would be like working for either of your companies, right? So I think this question goes to Ese. We'd like to know what are some of the benefits of joining your company, right? What is the average salary range, if you don't mind mentioning? And yeah, so it's more like pitch express pitch was why should we join your company? Are there plans for growth for developers? Why do you think we should join your company?
In terms of the benefits, I think there are lots of benefits that we as Express Pay as a team have. Some of them, I think, is the work environment, the atmosphere. We try to create an enabling environment to make it easy for people to grow. Technology is always changing. There's always something new to learn. There's always, you don't know, like in the same, I don't know everything. And at least I know that I don't know everything. So every day I'm working towards that. So we try and create that environment that you're not afraid to fail. You know that we are always there to help you. There's no like somebody who's senior or is there open lines of communication. In terms of the salary expectation, I think we're quite competitive. We are not, let's say, once we have an interview with you and you tell us, oh, your salary expectation is X, you have probation, you can prove that it's X or not. We don't have a problem with giving you that X. At the end of the day, once you're giving us the results, we're seeing results from you, we would pay that amount. We don't have an issue with paying. That's why I say we're competitive. So if you tell us 10,000 and you are worth 10,000 more, we will pay you that. We don't have a problem as long as you are generating, you're helping us move forward.
So I think what to say in essence is when you go for an interview with Express Pay, you have to be very wise when you are negotiating, right? Make sure you call a particular amount that you feel you are worth and you can deliver on the job. It's willing to pay, right? So don't go below expectations. Thank you for that. I hope I'm right. You just said
I mean, just make sure you what you ask for is what you're worth.
Yeah.
So don't give me something that's really unreasonable.
Okay, nice. Makes a lot of sense. So I think the next one goes to Nana Bain. So for Ramcat, what's your company culture? We'd like to know. Like just give us a feel of a normal dev's day at work, right? Even your personal experience, what motivates you to go to work every day? How is your workplace? Do we have to wear suit and tie? Or can we wear shorts and flip-flops and come around? Just help us have natural experience. So,
Okay,
yeah.
so at Rancard, okay. The irony is that I've worked with Francis there before. Okay, so we are not a suit place at all. Far from it.
I used to wear shorts.
Yeah. From Monday to Friday I wear Birkenstocks. So we are not a suit place, but the culture, the organizational culture is more candid. When you express your opinion, you have to be respectful, but nobody's holding you not to say what's on your mind. Even to CEO, you can have a frank discussion to him about it. We also have, the fun bit is not a lot, forgive us. But we do have tech sessions where, for instance, for this year, each of us have been assigned with a research work into new technologies and forward technologies. So, and at Rancard, we are always at that cutting edge, always new stuff. So it's you always have to be on your feet, keep learning. And we do have our corporate outings. I think once a year, every Friday, we go out to the office and have a. So that's also part. But it's a place that I think the organization itself always looks out for people who think hard, people who are naturally curious, who want to hacky thinkers. So it's something that the organization also pushed to you. And a normal day starts with me, for instance. A normal day starts with emails, log reviews, how applications are doing, bug fixes, bug complaints, Trello boards. Then I move on to new features that I've built, have estimated time, communicate with product managers, and then yeah. So it's usually my day usually starts around 9 a.m. and then ends around 9 p.m.
Okay.
Sometimes, depending on the issue, it can go to the next morning, but usually that's how it is. Francis had done overnight before, and on his way home, something happened. Yeah, so it's all part of it.
Yes. Oh, that's nice. So, I mean, they've said it all, mostly. A tech environment, as much as there's so much to do, I think he mentioned still you have to keep building your skills and or try to create fun for yourself still. But yeah, it's a good one. So my next question goes to Lady Omega. So I would like to know how you measure work performance. I think he mentioned Trello, and you understand there are certain tools that companies use for this. So we'd like to know how you measure work performance of developers, and how you manage collaboration, project management, and how to code reviews. Mostly the tools you use for this.
Okay, so we measure your progress based on the number of pull requests you make per day. We also use Trello. We list out your task we do 2-week sprint planning per project because we work on quite a number of projects, and within a day we have to get the work done, so we have stand-ups every day at 4 p.m. So every day you have to tell us what you've done in person, apart from we'll look at your Trello board if it goes with what you're saying as well. And then in terms of code review, you'd have a senior developer, someone who is higher in your expertise, to go through it and make sure that everything that you've written actually works as it should. Yeah, so maybe those are some of the things that we do.
Yeah, so Trello, code reviews with senior developers,
yes.
Right? So is it that you have your stand-ups in the evening rather than in the morning?
Yes. So in the mornings is with maybe one-on-one with the project manager, but in terms of like the whole team would be like every day 4 p.m. But if you're not there, we use Slack as well.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
That's cool. So, my next question goes to Augustine. Yeah, really sweaty. It's not a hard one, don't worry. So, like I said earlier, last time we met, we spoke about a couple of things and some issues were raised in relation to how whether or not companies are willing to work with developer communities, right? So, I think we would like to hear from you, being a representative of other companies, right? What's your take on employees involving in open tech communities, contributing to open source projects, and does your company have any support for communities like ours?
Okay, I'm going to be careful with my response. The open source community is important. It has its pros and cons. It's a good place to exchange ideas. I once went through ASP.NET Core, their open source site, and there was a bit of a problem with one of the libraries. And okay, it was actually a library that someone had written for the new .NET Core stack, and then somebody was bugging the author that your part of your code is, it has to do this, it has to do that, it's not doing this, it's not doing that, it has to do this, it has to do that. And the author just gave one line response. I'm trying very hard to paraphrase it. He was saying that open source is not meant to solve your problem. It's just to provide a framework for you to think on and then extend. So he in his free time does what he does. But if the guy thinks he has a better idea, fork it in programming terms. Fork it and then move on. We would love to help whatever community it is if we are doing something that would affect everybody positively. I was just reading, let me just refer to this article where it says that in 54 countries in Africa, home to 1.3 billion people, a staggering 725 million of them wield mobile devices. Right? So we welcome any idea that can affect the holders of these devices. How do businesses communicate with their customers? How do they make and receive payments? How do they do commerce electronically? So if your open source products goes in line with a company's vision, it's fine. Please don't be bugging us to support something that is out of scope.
Yes,
we may for charitable reasons, but ideally we have a focus. And if our focus is wrong and yours is right, we will shift and we will support yours and make sure that the ultimate vision everybody benefits. China is, as if like, if I can say, the leading example of commerce and everything. Africa is regarded China. So whoever wins or whoever has that nice vision and goes in line with, now speaking for Aptel, we'll push it nicely. We have some open source projects that is stuck around our core objectives, USSD and some SDKs here and there. But yeah, if you come and bug us about things that are not in our focus and we see we can't spend time on it, and it's something you can fix by yourself, please do. We are open to sponsor, support. The first hackathon Dev Congress did, Adam was the first runner-up. We backed it up. It was Empower that collaborated with Dev Congress. We backed them. So we like the ideas and concepts that came. Some of them are even driving our vision now. And I think it's helping a lot. So we just want to be careful with how we do it's open source. You don't put all your open source.
Okay, so I guess, is it speaking your mind?
I mean, I agree a lot. Usually, as companies, you primarily want to focus on your goal, right? So that's the most important, trying to generate income for the company and trying to bring some money so you can pay your employees. So sometimes open source, we benefit from it, but you might not necessarily try and focus on our efforts on building some open source which is not really tailored towards our goal. Right? So if you build something that we benefited from, sometimes depending on the nature of what it is, we don't want to open it up, then our competitors might also benefit from our IP. But if it's not too big, sometimes you would be more generous with your goal.
Okay, so the two of them, I think we at Rankard, we are trying to move more into, so in-house, we build with the developer first attitude. So the project I'm on, I always have APIs that I extend for another project to consume, and we tend to do that first. So we are planning to launch out APIs for the developer. We can do that and not really expose too much of our internal, shall I say, property as in the algorithm, but we can expose it so that developers too can integrate and further extend. Yeah.
So nice. So I think this will be our last one for me. So we'd like to know, people talk about the future of work and all of this, but in this case we are not necessarily talking about robots taking over the jobs now. We're talking about attitude towards moving developers from 9 to 5 down to like remote work and things like that. So I would like to know what's your take on telecommuting, right? And remote work, and is it a practice in Google?
So personally, as we said, I think it's the future of our nature of work. And I think that Netherlands will agree. Because they say well, talent is evenly distributed. Yeah, opportunity is not. It's eventually going together. The kinds of tools that we use and the way we communicate as a community. So I think it's our future. At CodeLn, we run a semi-remote system. So 2 weeks in every month, we work from home. So working from home doesn't mean you have flexible hours. Like you can start at any time and at any time. You come online at 8:30. You log off at 5:30. So that's why I say working from home, not remote. So that's the culture, the remote culture. What I can say about that is the reason why it's been a bit easy to transition to that is because CodeLn was originally or started out pretty much as a distributed team. Right? We had people working with us from India who we had to work with on Slack and all that. Mega mentioned a number of tools. We don't use Trello, we use GitHub issue tracker. Yeah. So we employ other tools like Slack for synchronous communication. When there's an issue that you can't communicate textually, you can use Google Meetup to quickly sort out the issue and then have a quick discussion and then settle on something, right? And we write our documentation on GitHub or Google Docs. So it was already like that. So it was really easy to just move it all out of the office. Right? So main challenge there has been communication, right? And timely communication, maybe, and being able to speak up online, being able to communicate by text, right? Clearly putting together your ideas and sharing them online. So that's been pretty much a bit of a challenge. And then another challenge has been, for most developers, is keeping that trust. Because in Ghanaian companies want you to work in the office, right? Yeah, and they want to see that you are working. In fact, if you are living with people in the community, they want to see that you are wearing your shirt and your tie and holding your briefcase and going in. Right? So there's a level of trust that you have to build as an employee, as a developer. Right? And that can only be done by actually meeting your commitments, as you said. You don't estimate beyond your capacity. Right? And you should be very good at estimating. Right? And you should be also very, very good at meeting your commitments each and every time. Don't break the trust that your employer has given you for making sure that you are actually comfortable in your pajamas and you're sitting in front of the laptop and working. But then, yeah, so that's basically how it goes down.
So, Eden, I think you might, being that you have an experience working as a remote developer, how has it been for you? And do you still get this vibe from society that this guy is not working? Or I think somebody mentioned it, I've forgotten his name, he works in Canada still. He says he doesn't go to work in the morning, and people are like, what is this guy doing? He's doing some shady kind of business. How has it been for you? Is it something you've enjoyed so far? And how has it been effective? Like he mentioned the challenges. Do you have like internet challenges or things like that?
So I mean, I think I've been working remotely at different phases in my career, and so each experience has been different. So when I started working remotely, it was mainly when I moved back to Ghana after ThoughtWorks, and back then the main challenge was infrastructure, like good internet access, so you can actually do work. Because the thing that you have to remember is that when you're working remotely for clients who are not, in your country, they lack the local context of understanding why your internet is slow, why you're not online when you say you're online, all those kind of things. They don't. There's a lot of local context they lack. So you have to be able to go beyond like normal or regular expectations to be able to provide some of these things. So it's not unlikely for a freelance engineer to spend 700 cedis a month just because they need 2 or 3 different internet providers because you can't, those kind of things. And then power, you have to get like a generator because they don't understand solar, they don't care, right? So infrastructure was a big one. Then there is also that stigma, like you said, like in our culture, when you say you work, people want to see you going to work. People want to see you. And it was a very funny story because when I was renting the house in which I am right now, the landlord wanted to know what I do. And so the thing is, he didn't even ask me, what do you do? He asked me, what company do you work for? And I didn't know how to respond because I was like, I work for myself. So he's like, okay, so what do you do? Then, and the funny question was when I said, oh, I'm a software engineer, I do. Next question is, are you Nigerian? I mean, I just felt bad for my Nigerian brother because, like, as soon as they see laptop, they see. So there's always that stigma, and I don't think that's going to disappear anytime soon. But what's happening now is I'm seeing more and more companies encouraging remote work, and that is because first of all, it's hard to find developers. All of them are not necessarily based where you are. It's actually cheaper if you allow them to work remotely because you could offer slightly lower wages because they don't have to come to work. You could offer less benefits because you don't have to pay them transportation and things. So that could end up also being slightly cheaper. So I feel like as more and more companies embrace that way of work, that stigma will sort of disappear over time. So luckily, since I've joined Andela, I haven't really experienced that much because Andela is a much bigger organization. People know it. So if you say you work for Andela, whether you're working remotely or you're working in an office, it doesn't matter. So that hasn't happened a lot. But the challenge of infrastructure like internet sometimes going down, not having electricity, so you have to get a generator. All these things are still challenges. So I feel like if you want to embrace that lifestyle, it's things you have to do progressively. Like even you start off by buying a desk. It's so funny because when people join Andela, initially I'll get questions like, I'm looking to buy a desk and a chair, what can you recommend? Because that's how they start, right? The next thing is like, oh, I want to buy a monitor because you need to be more productive. I want to buy a wireless keyboard because my hand, is not ergonomic. And then they just keep, I have to get a generator, I have to get this, I have to get that. So it's like, it's things that you can't do all at once. So it's like you keep improving your workflow by adding these things to make up for the lack of infrastructure until you get to a point where you're comfortable enough and you can work like remotely, like at the same expectations for that the clients that you're working for has of you. So yeah, that has been the experience. So I think right now the main challenges is around infrastructure and the stigma attached to people who work remotely that like they're not doing anything.
What's your last word for us? Any word of advice? And also, if you have tools or platforms that we can leverage, and I think you said you have APIs that you will be opening to the public soon. You also mentioned too that you support anything around your business, right? So I don't know if from all of you, are there what are the words of advice you can leave us with? And do you have any platform that you use or source tool or any?
Okay, so concerning remote work, what I can say is, if you are an entry developer or a junior developer, you don't really have to be upset about working from home. Get some value to working in an office because for you, you just started your career. It's good to be around people who are more experienced than you. One, it's good for you to deliver on the task, and also to have people to look at you. Because if you're starting out or when you're starting out, there are a whole lot of things that you don't know. Having somebody that can mentor or guide you, like you say, or sitting side by side with someone and doing pair programming, it's something that is really useful because even in a remote setting, you still do pair programming. So if you can do it with someone and have an experience of how it's like, then you get to the point where you're doing remote work. That would be very good. Most employers really are not open to allowing their junior developers to do remote. Even Andela actually isn't very open to that idea where if you're in a fellowship and you're like a junior developer, they want you to go to the office and that kind of thing. They have a flexible work policy, but that is like an exception. Like when you're a senior, then you know that you've been through enough fire for you to be able to know that why it's important for you to be able to tax and things like that. So if you're here and you're junior or you're starting out, you don't have much experience. Don't be so like, I don't know, I don't want to use some words. Don't be delusional. Like, don't think that, oh, there is remote work. I'm a developer, I have a laptop, I can do my work from home. Don't go about carrying yourself like that. Think, I can understand why you think like that. Sometimes you need to think like an employer. If you're not thinking like an employer, there are certain things that doesn't really make sense to you. But as you grow, that's when you begin to think like an employer. When you even begin to interview people, that's when you now start, okay, that's why I didn't get this job. That's why I didn't get that job. Yeah, because some of the things, if you're not aware of them, you think like, okay, this company is being unreasonable. But there are so many reasons why some companies would rather incur the cost of having you in their office and having CCTV cameras watching you than you sitting in your house and do so. Yeah, so learn how to work before you run.
Learn how to work before you run.
Okay. So for me, so word of advice is a lot of I think we've gotten to this phase in technology where there are so many tools, frameworks, languages, techniques. There's just so much out there to learn. And the mistake that I see so many junior engineers making, and people who are about to start making, is focusing on learning the the tools instead of focusing on how to solve problems, right? It doesn't, if you know how to throw a hammer top down and know that, okay, this is how it works, but you don't actually know in what cases that it's good to use a hammer, then you haven't done anything, right? So I would encourage you to focus on your problem solving skills, like pick problems and try to figure out how you can solve these problems, and then how. And one thing that I always say is that before you even get to the tech part, before you get to the part where you're writing the code and all that, the problem should be solved on paper. Like you should be able to describe, what the solution would be on paper before you even start writing the code. And that's a mistake that so many junior engineers make. So I'll give you an example. So I'm currently working on CodeLn as my client, and CodeLn has this tool that we built that allows engineering teams figure out their performance. So CodeLn, so basically you can visualize the number of pull requests that were made, the number of commits that were made by each person, how many pushes per day, and then you summarize it for you like on a weekly basis or 2-week sprints and all that, right? So we have this page called the activity log where every pull requests are represented by diamonds, commits are represented by circles, review comments are represented by squares, right? And we cluster them into like a little box. So when you see someone's data, you are seeing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then you see like a cluster of different shapes, and that will give you like a visual idea of whether the person was working on a particular day more compared to less, because you have more shapes in one or the other, right? So now we had this interesting problem. So the cluster was basically using an algorithm where it was pulling all of the shapes to the center of the box, right? So that we can really create a cluster. Otherwise, it's all scattered over the place. So that's how we're doing it. And it turned out that we're using 3D.js for those who know. And 3D.js would treat every single shape as a circle, and it tries to push them all together, right? So then one of the guys on my team was in charge of designing the part of the application where we're rendering PR, like the pull request comments, which are represented as squares, right? And what ended up happening was the squares would overlap with other shapes, right? So it wasn't creating this perfect cluster with margins and stuff. And he spent a week doing things like adjusting the sizing, adjusting the space, adding margins and all that. And then, so he came to me and he's like, I don't understand why this is happening. And he's tried all these things, but then when we push it to production, there is always some overlapping happening somewhere. And when he adds too much margin, then it doesn't look like a cluster anymore. When he uses it, I'm like, okay, so let's break this problem down. Let's actually break it down. How does a cluster happen? He says, oh, it's putting all the shapes there. I'm like, okay, so how is it doing it? Read the code and realize that all of the shapes are being treated as circles. So no matter what the shape actually is, there is an invisible circle around it that it's looking at. And then I look at the code for how he was building the square, and it turns out that he was plotting the square in such a way that the invisible circle was inside the square, not the square being inside the circle. So then, because the cluster was pulling based on the size of the invisible circle, it was always overlapping. So there's always the corner parts and all that were overlapping. So you see how not really understanding the problem can just drive you in the direction that you shouldn't be going into. So that skill, it is the most important skill you can ever have. So we end up seeing it like, okay, so we need to plot this thing and make the square inside the circle. How do we do that? We realize that, oh, okay, so a square inside a circle is just basically two triangles that are combined. So if you can find the size of the diagonal side is basically the radius of the circle, so you can find, that's a mathematic thing. And then we Googled it, found a way to calculate the size of, okay, this is what we should do. And then it worked, right? And he was so amazed because it's like, you took 30 minutes to figure out something that I was doing for a week. And I'm like, it's because you were not thinking about the problem. You were looking for like a patch. It's kind of like, let's say you have a headache and instead of taking, like paracetamol, you go and put your head under, cold water. It's not going to, you know what I mean? It's not going to solve the problem. It's just like trying to patch up something. But like, can you go to the core of the problem, understand it, solve it on paper before you write the code? So please, don't focus on the technologies. They will come and go. I've seen it like 15 years. There are things that we're learning that today are completely irrelevant. So if you focus so much on the technologies, think about the technologies as these are just tools that I need to do my work. Focus on actually knowing how to solve the problem. You've heard all of them. All of them care about people who can solve problems. Like if you're given a problem. And the other thing you should also realize is that, in Africa, we are still in this emergence phase where there are so many problems around that are completely different from what the world has seen or how the world has solved it. Which means that something that has already been tested and has worked in some markets is not guaranteed to work here. Like, if ExpressPay should tell you how they fight fraud every day, you'll be shocked and surprised at the kind of things they have to do simply because of how some systems were designed and they have to kind of like, work around so many things. And then, like initially I used to get frustrated, like, why is this? And then when it started explaining, I was like, hey, okay, let me keep quiet. Because it is not that simple. So you really need to, think out of the box and be able to analyze problems. If you're looking at, frameworks and tools and all that, you have to remember that those tools were created because somebody had a problem in their context, solved it, decided to open source it, and then there were enough people who also faced the same problem in that context or that market, and it became very popular, right? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be relevant here. Like, there are companies down here who will tell you they write their entire JavaScript from scratch because the libraries that you add from JavaScript are too big, and the people who is going to open their website, they're going to use phones that have edge connection. So they will rather write their entire JavaScript from scratch. Like, that's just mind-blowing because nobody will tell you that the conventional wisdom is do not repeat, do not reinvent the wheel, do not repeat yourself and all that. But these guys are doing that because in our context, we still have to deal with crappy internet connection and all that. So it's very important that you understand the local context and really build your problem solving skills. Like, so important. Like, focus on that, learn how to solve problems on paper, and only consider move from, okay, I've solved a problem on paper and now I'm going to use the tech to implement it. That phase is more important. If you find someone who can do that, you can teach them anything, and they think about technology as, okay, this is the problem that I'm trying to solve, this is the solution I have in mind, so this is the tech I'm going to use to solve it, right? And that's more valuable. That will take you way further than learning specific technologies that you become experts in and you can't do anything else.
Interesting. Thank you very much. So,
earlier we talked about how to value yourself as a developer, correctly value yourself as a developer. And I want to, yes. The question is to you.
Why are you asking me? How am I supposed to do that?
How important is it for a developer to properly value themselves? Like when you're telling an employer, if an employer should ask you, how much would you like to be paid? That reservation that usually comes and makes you want to feel humble. Like how important is it that a developer should properly value themselves?
It's very important. I mean, look, a developer is an employee. A company hires someone because that person adds value to the company, right? So the work you are doing is directly or indirectly tied to how much money the company makes. Okay, so you should be able to know what the value you bring to that company is, right? And be able to value yourself based on that, right? And it's very, what you're saying is true. Like, many developers have this, attitude where when you ask you, how much do you want to be paid and all that, they are shy, they are trying to be humble, they don't really know how to answer the question. And it all comes from the fact that as a developer, many people don't just do this self-reflection on a yearly basis or maybe every 6 months to understand their growth, right? And if you don't do that, you don't know how you're you don't know anything, right? So one thing what I did when I was growing was I started off by looking at software engineers' profiles on LinkedIn. You know, I wanted to understand, okay, so this guy is a principal engineer at Microsoft. How did he start? You know, how long did it take him to go from this position to this position? What are the things that he did, right? Am I able to do these things? Or what do I need to learn to be able to also do these things? So on LinkedIn, I'm interested I was interested in consulting. So I was on almost every major engineering or people who were consultants in the engineering sector. I was on their LinkedIn profiles, all of them. What schools did they go to? What did they study in school? How did they get to their position? What are the things that they did and all that, right? And assess yourself. You know, like assess yourself and say, okay, I have 4 years of experience. By the time this guy had 4 years of experience, these are things that he was doing right then, right? Understand what the salary levels for that position is, and then ask yourself, okay, can I do these things? If I can't do it, what is missing right now? You have to assess yourself. Like, it's a personal self-reflection that you do. So I mentioned earlier when I was talking about my CV that I've been coding for 10 years. I'm tired of coding. So now I want to actually go into engineering management, you know, have like a director level kind of position where I manage more. I mean, I've led teams before, but these are like small teams that it's still like you are still writing code for about 50% of the time and you're doing management for another one. I want to do full management where I have like, you know, tech leads reporting to me and all that. So I've looked at different profiles and I'm like, okay, people after 10 years you should go to this kind of work, right? But there are still gaps I can see on my profile that shows me that, okay, these things I can't do them yet, so I need to start ramping up on, you know, like learning how to do these things and those who do these things. You should do this every single year, at least once a year. Go back to your profile and do that, right? Compare that to what the job titles in the market are, and then what the salary expectations are from these persons. Right? So if you're eyeing Express Pay, you know that Express Pay is paying their senior software engineers 10,000 cedis a month. And you know that, okay, on average, a senior software engineer at Express Pay has maybe 5 years of experience, and you have 2 years of experience. So you look at, okay, the person who has 5 years of experience at Express Pay that's earning 10,000 cedis a month. What are they doing that I need to start learning now that, you know, would get me there? And then you know, speak to them. A lot of them are in our community. Understand what their job is. Understand their role. Ask them how, you know, I'm facing this problem. How did you learn how to do this? And all that. And then upgrade yourself. And all it's okay, I think I'm at the level where I can take on this job. And you realize that when you do this personal assessment, you are going to have to ask yourself the kind of questions that when you go for the interview, they will ask you. You see, and you will answer it so naturally because it's something you have done yourself. Whereas it's like, imagine a situation where they ask you, can you explain, you know, or can you tell us about you know, a situation where you faced like a technical challenge and how did you solve it? And then you start thinking, okay, I don't know, you don't even know what example to use, what, you know. But you should be able to talk about these things, like it just flows because you have so many examples, because you've run them in your head, you've done them, you've experienced them, you've documented them, and you know. See, so these things have to be done. But we don't do that self-reflection ourselves. We are always waiting for the company that you work for to promote you because they feel like, okay, you worked with us for a while, we want to give you more responsibilities. You should be in charge of your own career. Like, you shouldn't have to wait for a company to tell you, okay, you're going to have to be at the next level. Like, you should always be thinking, what is the next level? What am I missing now to be able to get there? And then once you feel you have those skills, so that's how you know your value. It's like, okay, I know I can do this now, so this is what I'm worth, right? So if the company says, okay, yeah, you can do that, but we can't pay you, then you know you have to start looking for, you know, another opportunity. So that's how you do it. And you should do it constantly, whether it is twice a year, once every quarter, or once a year. You should have a schedule and say, okay, every year or every 6 months, I'm going to assess myself based on what my next goal is, and then see whether the things that I need to learn to get there, I know them. If you know them, then your value increases.
So to add to that, one method you can pick up is developing a skill matrix. Right? It's in line with what he says. You know exactly what it takes, what skills you need to acquire to get you to from novice to advanced, right? And you should have acceptance criteria for each and every skill that you put in that matrix, right? So every day or every whatever period you use, right? You highlight the ones you've been able to get, right? And you clearly know where you're at, right? And you can actually value yourself based on that.
So we'll take the last question from Simon.
So on the issue of like candidate focus so much on like tools. I mean, don't you think like the companies we have like we can blame the companies because you see so many job ads and you see 2 or 3 years experience with Python, jQuery, and the likes. Don't you think like the companies are mostly responsible for the companies like focusing so much on how to learn React, how to like.
Okay, so if I may take that, the company exists to make profit. Right. And a way to make profit or to get their product out there is by the tools that they use. I hope I'm right. Right. So to maximize the production flow, they would always advertise what they use and how well you fit in, so that when you come, your transition won't be so expensive. And that's more of a domain area, right? But it doesn't. We had a situation where someone actually wrote on the CV that he knows Laravel. Can you imagine? So, at least Laravel is implemented in PHP, right? So you know PHP. So if I give you a problem and I don't have Laravel in my stack, doesn't mean you can't use PHP to solve it. So the underlying basics are, non-negotiable. You need to know them. You knowing the domain areas is a plus. Some companies actually, when you go for the technical review interviews, when you solve a problem and they know you are not conversant with the technologies they use, but you solve the problem even using pseudocode, right? They can take you on because then they know that your fundamentals are right and your learning curve won't be that steep because the nuances of the language, the syntax, virtually every language has an if statement in it. It's really slow. So that's the thing about them advertising for, but that doesn't mean that you can't apply for them. You can apply for them and solve the problem in your own language that you are competent with. Yeah.
Okay, so to add to Nana's point, so of course, if I run a company and I use PHP or I use JavaScript in my company to develop product, it's important for me to attract talent that is competent in those because then it means that it won't take them long for them to be productive. The company is there to be able to meet their objectives or their goals for the year or for the quarter. And the more time you use to ramp up their technologies, the more money that they're losing on your head. Yeah. We want you to, some even go to the extent of putting in the job description that you hit the ground running. So some of them that do that. What we mean by not being a framework-centric developer is when you hear of a framework like React, you see that there's a very high demand for React developers nowadays. You learn React, you learn the basics of React, you learn the advanced parts of React. You don't have to stop there. Find out, okay, what even motivated that framework to be created? Why did the Facebook developers decide to create React? That's a very good information for you to be aware of. And you have to identify the parts of React that you want to implement yourself. You have to be, you see, there are certain kinds of topics or talk ideas that comes into our minds as developers. I have a friend, like a colleague at Mandela, who wants to do a workshop on how he's actually implemented his own virtual DOM, like as React does it. He's implemented his own React DOM, but really when you survey the scene, like the community, you realize that, okay, this is a topic that people won't show interest in. But the guy wants to say, how do you create a gallery using React? That's what people want to, yeah. But the conversation that we're having now is, aside learning what React is and being able to do your work with React, also learn about the architecture behind React. How was React put together? What are the components that React is made up of? the JX syntax that you use, how did React achieve that JS syntax? Because you know that, okay, you write HTML and all of that, but now in JavaScript, you can just do angle bracket div and like no error is being thrown. What's going on? How is React achieving it? Be curious to learn these things, because these are the things that deepen your understanding of the technologies that you know. So we're not saying that don't know React or don't learn React or don't learn Express.js or whatever. Learn it and go beyond like the aspect of that framework where you can use it to do it. Learn the architecture behind it, learn the intent, some part of it. Go to the source code, how it is written and all of that. And all of these things will give you ideas on how to do your work more effectively.
Thank you very much. I think we are really very grateful. Can we give them a round of applause?